A group of loudmouths humiliate a quiet soldier over her battle scars. What happens next leaves the entire diner speechless. I pushed open the heavy glass door of Tilly's Corner Diner on Buckthorn Avenue, Reading Hollow, Virginia, the bell above jingling like a distant memory of simpler days. The late afternoon sun spilled through the windows, painting the checkered linoleum floor in shades of gold and amber. The air carried the warm, greasy scent of frying burgers, and the faint tang of coffee left too long on the burner. My name's Samantha Torres, Sam to those who know me, and I'm not one for fanfare. At 29, with 2 tours in Afghanistan behind me, I just wanted a quiet spot to sit, eat, and prep for a job interview at the community center down the road. My olive green army jacket hung loose on my frame, a little worn at the cuffs, and my duffel bag thumped against my hip, holding my resume, a spare shirt, and a creased photo of my old unit, the 101st Airborne. A jagged scar ran from my left temple to my jaw, a souvenir from an IED that nearly ended me 3 years ago. Most days, I barely noticed it. Today, I felt its weight. I slid into a booth by the window, the vinyl creaking under me. The diner hummed with life, truckers hunched over meatloaf, retirees swapping stories over pie, and a gaggle of teenagers giggling over milkshakes in the corner. I kept my head down, not looking for trouble, just a grilled cheese and coffee to steady my nerves. The waitress, a young woman with a name tag reading Kayla, approached, her ponytail bouncing and her smile worn but kind. "What'll it be, hun?" she asked, pencil hovering over her notepad. "Coffee, black, and the grilled cheese combo," I said, keeping my voice low, polite. I offered a small smile, hoping to keep things light. She nodded and shuffled off, her sneakers squeaking on the floor. Outside, Route 17 droned on, a steady pulse of cars and semis rolling through the Virginia countryside. I pulled out my resume, smoothing the creases, trying to focus on the interview questions I'd rehearsed. Community outreach coordinator, not glamorous, but steady. A new start. Then I heard it, a sharp laugh, too loud, cutting through the diner's hum. At the counter, 3 guys in their early 20s sprawled across their stools, all faded jeans and trucker hats. The loudest, a lanky one with a goatee, leaned toward his buddy, his eyes locked on me. "Check out G.I. Jane over there," he said, his voice carrying like he wanted the whole room to hear. "What's with the face? Looks like she tangled with a barbed wire fence and lost." His friend, a stocky guy with a buzz cut, snorted, nearly choking on a soda. The third, quieter, fiddled with his phone but smirked all the same. I kept my eyes on my resume, my fingers tightening on the paper. I'd heard worse. Catcalls in dive bars, whispers in VA waiting rooms. People see the scar, the jacket, and think they know me. They don't. I wasn't here to prove anything, just to eat and move on. But their laughter scraped at me, like sand in a wound that never quite healed. Kayla returned with my coffee, the mug clinking against the table. She glanced at the counter, her lips pursing. "Don't mind them," she muttered. "They're in here every week, acting like they run the place." I nodded, sipping the bitter brew, its heat grounding me. "Thanks," I said, keeping my tone even. She lingered a moment, like she wanted to say more, then moved on. The goatee guy, Derek, I heard his friend call him, didn't let up. "Yo, soldier girl," he shouted, drawing eyes from every corner of the diner. "What's the deal with the scar? You fall off a tank or something?" His buddy cackled, slapping the counter. A woman at a nearby table shifted uncomfortably, her fork pausing mid-bite. The teenagers' giggles quieted, their phones now angled my way, catching the show. I took a slow breath, my old training kicking in. Stay calm, assess, don't escalate. I'd faced ambushes in Kandahar, watched friends bleed out in the dirt. A few loudmouths weren't worth my energy. But the diner was watching now. Their stares like a spotlight I couldn't escape. My scar burned under their gaze, a map of pain I didn't ask to carry. Derek leaned forward, his voice louder. What? You too tough to talk? Or just embarrassed about that face? The words hit like a punch, and for a moment, I was back in the hospital, the beep of monitors in my ears, the sting of stitches pulling my skin together. I set my coffee down, my hand steady, but my chest tight. I wasn't embarrassed. I was tired. Tired of being a spectacle. Tired of explaining myself to people who'd never understand. A man in a flannel shirt at a nearby table glanced up from his newspaper, his brow furrowing, but he didn't speak. Kayla shot Derek another glare, wiping down a table with more force than necessary. The air in the diner thickened, like the moment before a storm breaks. Then the door jingled, and a new figure stepped in. A wiry man in his 50s, gray buzz cut under a faded army cap, his eyes sharp as he scanned the room. Leonard Carver, though I didn't know his name yet, carried himself like someone who'd seen war and walked away whole. He took a stool at the counter, a few seats from Derek's crew, and ordered a coffee, his voice low but firm. I didn't notice him at first, too focused on keeping my composure, but he was listening. His head tilted just enough to catch every word. Derek's laughter rang out again, and I felt the room tilt, the weight of their eyes pressing harder. I just wanted to eat, to get through this day. But trouble, it seemed, had found me anyway. You won't believe who stepped up for me when things got rough. This is just the start. Things are about to get heavier. The diner's hum faded under the weight of Derek's voice, his words slicing through the clatter of plates like a blade. "Come on, soldier girl, give us a war story," he called, leaning back on his stool, his goatee twitching with a smirk. "Or did you just get that scar from a paper cut at boot camp?" His friend Caleb laughed so hard he nearly tipped over, his soda sloshing onto the counter. The third guy, Ethan, glanced up from his phone, his smirk quieter, but just as sharp. The teenagers in the corner were filming now, their phones tilted like they were capturing a circus act. The rest of the diner, truckers, retirees, a couple in a booth, watched in uneasy silence, their forks pausing, their conversations stalling. I cut my grilled cheese with deliberate care, the knife scraping the plate. My scar itched, a phantom pain from that day in Afghanistan, the explosion, the heat, the screams of my unit. I'd pulled Javi Morales from the wreckage, my hand slick with blood, my face torn open by shrapnel. The Purple Heart sat in a box at home, untouched. I didn't need a medal to remind me what I'd survived. But here, in Tilly's corner, with every eye on me, that survival felt like a spotlight I couldn't dim. Kayla stormed over, her face flushed. "Derek, knock it off," she snapped, her voice trembling with anger. "She's just trying to eat." "Leave her alone." She planted herself between my booth and the counter, her hands on her hips, but Derek just grinned wider, spreading his hands like he was the star of the show. "Relax, Kayla," he said, his tone mocking. "We're just having fun. Right, soldier girl?" He raised his voice, making sure the whole diner heard. My fingers tightened on the knife, not out of anger, but instinct. Years of training telling me to stay steady, to wait. I'd faced worse than this. Insurgents didn't care about your feelings, and neither did Derek. But the public humiliation, the way the room watched me like I was a sideshow, clawed at something deep inside. Leonard Carver, the man with the army cap, sipped his coffee at the counter, his eyes flicking toward me. He'd noticed my jacket, the 101st Airborne patch stitched on my duffel bag, faded, but unmistakable. He'd served, I could tell. His posture, his calm under pressure, the way he watched without reacting. He reminded me of my old sergeant, the kind who could silence a room with a glance. But he didn't move. Not yet. Just listened as Derek's taunts grew louder. "Bet she's faking it," Derek said, leaning toward Caleb, his voice carrying like he wanted me to hear every word. "Probably bought that jacket at a thrift store to look tough. That scar's gotta be makeup, right? For the whole wounded warrior vibe. Caleb roared with laughter, and even Ethan chuckled, his phone forgotten. The words hit harder than I expected, each one a jab at the truth I carried in my bones. I'd spent months in recovery, relearning to walk, fighting nightmares of fire and dust. To hear it reduced to a costume made my stomach churn. I set my sandwich down, my appetite gone. The diner was a pressure cooker now, every stare a weight. The woman in the corner booth whispered to her friend, her eyes darting to my scar. The man in flannel lowered his newspaper, his jaw tight, but he didn't speak. I wanted to disappear, to walk out and leave this small-town circus behind. But running wasn't in me. Not then, not now. Kayla spun on Derek, her voice rising. That's enough, Derek. Pay your tab and get out. I'm not kidding. Her hands shook, but her stance was firm, like she'd had enough of these guys long before today. Derek tossed a crumpled 10 on the counter, standing with a dramatic stretch. Fine, we're going, he said, smirking. Didn't know this place was a veterans museum. Caleb and Ethan followed, their laughter echoing as they sauntered toward the door. But Derek couldn't resist one last shot. Hey, soldier girl, he called, pausing at the exit. Next time, get a better backstory. Nobody buys the tough girl act. The door slammed, the bell jangling like a gunshot. The diner went quiet, the air thick with the aftertaste of their words. I stared at my plate, my scar burning, my chest tight. I wasn't embarrassed. I was angry, not at Derek, but at the world that let guys like him think they could judge me. I'd survived war. I didn't need their approval. But the silence of the diner, the weight of their pity, felt like a betrayal all its own. Leonard slid off his stool, his boots heavy on the floor. Mind if I sit? He asked, gesturing to the seat across from me. His voice was steady, like he'd seen this kind of thing before, and knew how it played out. I hesitated, then nodded. Go ahead. Name's Leonard Carver, he said, settling in. 82nd Airborne, retired. Saw your patch. On first, right? His eyes held mine, not with pity, but recognition, like he saw the soldier under the scar. Yeah, I said, my voice quieter than I meant. 2 tours, Afghanistan? He nodded, leaning back. Figured. You've got that look. Seen some things, haven't you? He didn't push, just let the words sit. And for the first time that day, I felt like someone saw me. Not the scar or the jacket, but me. Outside, Derek's truck idled in the parking lot, their laughter still audible. I glanced out the window, my hand brushing my duffel bag, where the photo of my unit lay tucked away. The man in flannel approached, his newspaper under his arm. I should have said something, he said, his voice low. That was wrong, what they did. My brother's in the Navy. You guys, you do more than most ever know. Thanks, I said, managing a small nod. His words were a lifeline, small but real. But Derek's truck was still out there, and I knew this wasn't over. What happens next will catch everyone off guard. But it's exactly what's needed to set things right. The coffee in my mug had gone cold, but I held it anyway. The ceramic cool against my palms. The diner's silence lingered, heavy as the Virginia humidity outside. Derek's laughter drifted through the open window, sharp and careless, as he and his friends leaned against their truck in the parking lot. Bet she's crying in there, Derek said, loud enough for the whole diner to hear. Tough soldier, huh? Caleb tossed a soda can into the gravel, the clatter punctuating his laugh. Ethan stayed quiet, scrolling his phone, but his smirk said enough. Leonard Carver sat across from me, his army cap tilted back, his eyes steady. Kids like that, he said, his voice low. They think they're invincible because they've never been tested. You know better. His words were a quiet anchor, but they couldn't drown out the sting of Derek's taunts. My scar felt raw, like the shrapnel was still there, tearing through me. I wanted to tell Leonard about that day. The explosion, the blood, the way I dragged Javi to safety while my own face burned. But I didn't. Some stories you don't tell in a diner. The door jingled again, and two familiar figures stepped inside, their presence like a gust of fresh air. Tara Nguyen, a medic from my old unit, with her sharp eyes and short ponytail, scanned the room and locked onto me. "Sam Torres," she called, her voice cutting through the diner's haze. "No way in hell." Beside her, Javier Morales. Javi grinned, his broad shoulders filling the doorway. He'd been with me that day in Afghanistan, the one I pulled from the wreckage. We hadn't seen each other in years, not since I left the army, but here they were, in Reading Hollow, for a veterans event Leonard had organized. I stood, a real smile breaking through. "Tara? Javi?" Tara crossed the diner in quick strides, pulling me into a hug that smelled of hospital antiseptic and old memories. Javi clapped my shoulder, his grip firm. "Didn't expect to find you in a dump like this," he said, his grin wide but his eyes searching, like he could see the weight I carried. The diner's attention shifted, whispers rippling through the room. Leonard raised an eyebrow, piecing it together. "Your crew?" he asked. "Old unit," I said, my voice warmer now. "We went through some stuff." That was an understatement, but it was enough for now. Derek's voice cut through again, louder now. "Oh look, her backup's here," he shouted from the parking lot, laughing. "What is this, a wannabe military reunion?" Caleb echoed him, their voices like nails on a chalkboard. Tara's head snapped toward the window, her eyes narrowing to slits. "Who's the loudmouth?" she asked, her tone calm but dangerous, like the quiet before a storm. "Let it go, Tara," I said, my voice low. I didn't want a scene, not here, not now. But Tara was never one for letting things slide. She'd stitched me up after the IED, held my hand through the pain, cursed the doctors when they said I might not walk again. She knew what that scar meant. "Now," she said, heading for the door, "let's talk to these boys." Javi followed, his expression hard, and I sighed, grabbing my duffel bag. Leonard stood too, his boots heavy on the floor. The diner watched, the air electric with anticipation. Outside, the gravel crunched under our feet as Tara stopped a few feet from Derek's truck. He straightened, his smirk faltering but still there, like he thought he could talk his way out of this. "What's this?" he said, glancing at Caleb and Ethan. "You her bodyguards or something?" Tara crossed her arms, her stance steady. "You got a problem with my friend?" she asked, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "'Cause you're real loud about it." Derek laughed, but it was shaky now, his bravado cracking. "Just joking around," he said. "She's the one acting all tough with that fake scar." Javi stepped forward, his presence like a wall. "Fake?" he said, his voice low, dangerous. "I was there when that scar was made. She pulled me out of a burning Humvee while shrapnel tore her face apart. You ever smelled burning flesh, kid? You ever carried your buddy through a firefight?" His words hung in the air, heavy as the truth they carried. The diner's windows were full of faces now, patrons pressing close to watch. Derek's grin vanished, his face paling. Caleb shifted, his soda can forgotten in the gravel. Ethan looked away, his phone a lifeline he couldn't hide behind anymore. Leonard spoke up, his voice steady but firm. "You boys might want to think twice before you mock someone who's seen more in a day than you will in a lifetime." His army cap cast a shadow across his weathered face, and for a moment he looked like every sergeant I'd ever respected. The rumble of engines cut through the tension. Two military Humvees pulling into the lot, their tires crunching gravel. Major Denise Harper stepped out, her uniform crisp, her eyes like steel. She'd served with Leonard years ago and had gotten his text about trouble brewing. Behind her, A handful of soldiers fanned out, their presence quiet but commanding. "What's going on here?" Denise asked, her voice calm but carrying the weight of authority. Her gaze locked on Derek, who was sweating now, his bravado gone. Tara gestured toward him. "These guys think it's funny to mock a Purple Heart recipient," she said. "Maybe they'd like to explain themselves to you." Denise's eyes flicked to me, then back to Derek. "You mocking one of my soldiers?" she asked, her tone lethal. "Staff Sergeant Samantha Torres has more courage than you'll ever know. You're lucky she didn't put you through that wall herself." Derek stammered, his hands raised. We were just—" "Save it!" Denise snapped. "You're done here. And if I hear about you causing trouble again, you'll answer to me." She turned to me, her expression